Here we are, Ducks Don't Get Cold Feet, podcast number 18. We are here with Joel Vans, the Omega. Most people might just see his work as Vans the Omega. Let's say a street artist, could be, used to be a graffiti artist as it used to be called before it got a term, before it got a popular term. I was going on record and saying I think you're one of the most talented street artists in this country, definitely in South Australia. And I can guarantee if anyone's listening to this in South Australia, they would have seen your work somewhere.
Whether they know it or not, they would have seen it, for sure.
Correct.
Yes.
And after today, we're going to learn a little bit about what's in that mind of Joel. Or I don't know what your friends call you. Whether they call you Joel or they call you Vans.
I've got so many different names from different eras. I've got mates, old school mates that call me Chic, Fruit Bat, Mozzie with no wings, Vansy. Some people just call me Omega. Occasionally people call me Joel. And, my kid's some daddy. I've got many little aliases.
The final one's probably the most precious, that's for sure. Some people in our team like nicknames and some people don't. Do they, COVID? Yeah, so he's got his nickname. He's 19. He's always got allergies. COVID. Pretty simple.
Oh, shit.
So it's an easy one for us, and he loves working here, as you can tell. He's like the happiest guy.
He's killing it
in the room. So you've obviously you're based in Adelaide.
Yes.
If we go back to back in the early days, whereabouts did you grow up in Adelaide?
I actually grew up in. I was born at Christie's Beach. And then I moved to Hackham West, Morphett Vale, all around that sort of traps, and then down to Glandore, Bellevue Heights, Coromandel Valley, and then back down onto the flat. So
Jesus, so you've really covered the spectrum of Adelaide, and you ended up going. Were you at school at Blackwood? No? Yeah. I went to St. Therese as a child, the primary school in Kernlight Gardens, and then I ended up at Blackwood High and pretty well running amok at school. School at that stage of in the early 90s was just, I don't know, it was just sort of playtime. We were hardly there. Yeah,
it's very different to school today.
Yeah, it's like even kids today want to go to uni. I don't understand it, but some kids don't want to miss uni. Like some don't.
I would probably just be in the bar or trying to find a wall to paint and occasionally catch up or fall asleep in a dark room that they would call it. It's time to learn something. I'd be out like a light.
Oh shit! So let's talk about school for a bit. You actually, I believe, you went to school with some pretty big hoodlums. Would we know of any of those? And would I know of some of those?
Yeah, I went to school with the Hoods. Famous Hoods, very close mates of mine, and we grew up doing all sorts of, I guess, mischief as kids do at that time. But I guess that was my introduction more heavily into hip hop. Even though when I was a kid, hip hop it was very loosely sort of termed, and I guess there was sort of more R&B, and you'd have the occasional sort of American program that would come through, and it was sort of crossover of genres heading towards what we know as the sort of golden era of hip hop, which was the 90s.
Yep.
So being at school in that era was like really, really amazing. So, I guess normally we'd get kicked out of class, we'd end up sort of writing lyrics or freestyle rapping to each other in what was called T2 room, the people doing graffiti and the boys rapping in the corner, and then we all end up hanging out,
Is that no shit what was going down at Blackwood there?
Yeah, like every other day, like half of us were kind of in T2 for something that we did that was apparently naughty.
So it's fair to say, well, some bloody amazing pedigrees come from that situation, I guess.
Yeah.
When we talk about things that people enjoy doing, obviously art's somewhere along the lines there for you. Was there an age, like, did you come out of the womb fucking being able to draw with blood
pretty
or
well.
something like that? Or,
yeah, pretty well.
Yeah,
it was kind of like that.
No, really?
Yeah,
so from a really young age, I mean, we've been told that maybe at the age of 3, you actually started to draw.
Yeah, properly. Like my grandparents, like they were very artistic. My grandfather was like a musician. My uncle was a musician. My mum was a dancer. My nana had like a studio, like a proper studio set up, that I was in all of my life since I was born. So if I went around to my grandparents' place, I'd inevitably see her doing watercolor, oils, crochet, knitting, charcoals. She used every type of medium, decoupage. She was just arts and craft, and she'd, we'd be able to sit up there and I'd just be drawing, looking at her stuff. She'd always have fruit bowls out that she'd be drawing or painting oils and doing studies. So I was kind of always exposed to those types of things. It's just kind of funny that as soon as, I guess, I held a spray can in my hand, it was kind of game over.
Poor Nan. Like, hang on, Joel, my beloved grandson's here, and all of a sudden he's gone.
Yeah.
So when you talk about, learning and drawing, that's a tip. When you think of people doing art, I think every school's made kids draw the fruit bowl.
Yeah.
Some of that must have set in because you do like drawing fruit. Oh, yeah?
I do. I mean, I like drawing stuff to do with nature, natural things. Is what I kind of, I guess, love the most. And even some of the stuff where you see like the geometric sort of shapes and whatever, they actually come from my fascination and love of crystals.
Okay, that totally explains your
minerals.
Art. Yeah.
So it's not. I mean, occasionally it's sort of taking the hints of architecture, but those architects that I like have actually taken the cues from nature. So it's this sort of full sort of cycle. But I guess going back to school, and what I'd use in school was your crayons, your pastels, and all this stuff. And I used to do sort of pieces. We'd do tags and little pieces in stuff that you'd kind of yoink your crayons from school.
Yeah.
On the way to walking to like Sturt Stadium just down the road to go and play basketball or hang out, there'd be all these laneways on the way. So, you learn. I remember one of the first words that I did a piece of, like sketches and stuff, it was Sahara. So at school I would have learned something about Egypt, and Sahara came up and you'd write, I'd just write random names. I'd write all my family name. So I've got like pieces of, my mum's name's Janice, my dad's name Van. That's actually where Vans comes from.
Really?
So my middle name is Van, my dad's name is Van. So
is that like a kind of, it's a pretty hippie name, no? Or is it?
It sounds all right.
Yeah, it's cool.
People
like
think my name is like Van more like they're connected, but they're actually, Van is my middle name.
Okay.
Through my dad. But Van was very uninteresting to write with graffiti. Because if you think about the stroke, just up, down, up, down, up, down, up.
Yeah.
It's just so boring, So I actually put an S on the end because it gave it a little bit of funk. I was like, all right, I've got to have the curviest letter I can on the end here. And you could always like do an S and then like underline it underneath. I think when I was first started sort of putting up Vans more properly, it was that era that every T-shirt and every single logo out there was like a baseball logo. And you know how they always had the swoop that went under it?
Underneath,
right?
Yeah.
So I was like, that's where I'm going with my S.
So when we're going back like at school time, when obviously you picked up a spray can.
Yeah.
But pre-spray can. So when was it? That's about 15, was it, when you picked up the spray can? I was
No, spray can was at about 11 and a half.
Okay.
So just towards the end of sort of year 7. For me, I think because my birthday was in late September, I sort of, however I started school or finished, like I actually finished year 12 and I don't think I'd even turned 18.
So you finished school?
Yeah, when I finished school. Not that I should have passed, but we won't go there just yet. But yeah, going back to sort of primary school, running around, doing stuff with the crayons. Everyone, a lot of us had 1 or 2 or 3 tags. At the time, you could get like those bubblegum wrappers that had like, I think they're from Copenhagen, Denmark.
Yeah.
And they all had like hip hop sort of little pieces on them. And so we just sort of replicate the drawings and replicates the things that we'd see in the streets at the time, sort of from the 85, 86, 87 era. And you'd see it out in the street, you draw it at school, you walk down a laneway and you'd put it up. Yeah.
See, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Like, and did you have a bunch of mates that you've stayed with since then? Or, because artists, they have, in general, artists have their own style, and you can see that style and you can distinctly go, oh yeah, okay, that's so-and-so. did you have that from it? Like, were you? I look at my daughter. I reckon she's quite talented in drawing. I think you've seen some of her work.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know, is that normal? And I see some of the other pictures, and I don't see much of it. Like,
some people just have a flair. I think some of the drawings that I see from when I was a kid, and even early high school, I think they're some of the best pieces of artwork that I've done. There was something about the naivety and not. There was sort of a stage where there isn't copying as such. You know, there's emulation and there's sort of aspects of copying, but there's also like a middle ground that you just end up finding something that's you. And it was funny. When was it? Probably about 15 years ago, when my parents were sort of cleaning out like a dirt room from under the house. They found like just a bag full of like my old artwork, and it had stuff from like primary school, like books and folders and bits of artwork. And going through it, I'd actually, a lot of the stuff that I was doing when I was a really young kid, I had all these geometric patterns within the fills. I had all this stuff that I ended up doing later in my sort of graffiti, sort of street art career. But there was a sort of 15-year gap in between, and I hadn't seen any of that stuff. And it just sort of would naturally came back out, like the fascination of all the patterns. This was when I was at age 6 and 7. I was doing letters that were just filled with patterns and all this other crazy stuff. And then, yeah.
So you've still got all your original work by any chance?
A lot of stuff, yeah.
I was going through my stuff at home, and my mum's kept everything.
Yeah.
Like, certificate and... so let's have a look. So saw the stickers and whatnot and poems. So there's all this stuff. My mum's kept from year 4 and whatnot. And one of my mates had a poem there, and I took a photo of it and sent it to him. Monsters in space. Deep in space, the monsters, slimy and green, strong monsters, which fight with long claws. They slice you in half. Jason Shepherd, if you're listening, it's very poetic. But keeping that, my mum kept everything, and it was fascinating to go back and start to have a look at some of the stuff that I'd done. I'm assuming with your art, you've just said you were doing things back then, which is exactly what you're doing now.
Parts of, and some things so closely linked to what I was doing as a younger kid. I'd do it just naturally as a young artist, just trying many different things out and combining like a bunch of styles and color palettes.
Yeah.
And then I spent, 10, 15 years kind of moving away or moving in different directions, trying to perfect different techniques and ideas, and then found myself naturally coming back to what I was already doing and quite advanced doing when I was younger, which was really, really interesting to see and find once I got that artwork back. I was like, holy shit, I've just done a rendition of this like last week, and this is from 15 years ago.
And had no recollection until...
No, not in that kind of way.
So is that like a muscle memory style where you've done it with, unconsciously thinking about it, the mind's creative and holds all that structure, and then you come back at, 5 years later, 10 years later?
15 years later.
Yeah, later.
Yeah.
And you can replicate that because that's what's going through your mind. Is that exactly what you've seen there? Or
yeah, maybe it's just a space that you end up affording yourself. You end up in a space where you feel free and confident, and you just put forward what you feel to do. And then somehow that links up to that feeling that you had when you were younger of just being free and not caring what people thought of what you were doing.
Yeah, and I think as an artist, I think that's the hardest thing to actually do, especially maybe when you're starting to get paid for it or you're starting to try and make a living from it as an artist. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, very fair. Like my favourite artwork is never seen.
Yeah.
It's what I do for my self-experimenting in places. It's what's underneath a lot of the paintings that people don't get to see, and the process, which is my favourite part of a lot of the paintings.
Yeah, you saw that painting there from Old Rock.
Yeah.
Yep. And I got to ask him, hey, what's the deal with the face? It must be someone you know. And he's turned around and said, no, that I just know that face just comes to me when I'm doing art. Is that the same feelings that you get? I find it hard to believe it's not mirrored off someone. Like, I don't know. I'm a visual person.
Not with faces. Not personally. That doesn't come that way for me with faces, but color palettes and particular shapes, light sources, pattern. that's all just sort of there's just a bank in my brain of that stuff, and then I kind of see things before I put them down on a wall. So a lot of the time when I start, my process is actually to stare at a wall, and I feel like I see a line come out of that wall.
That's cool.
And then I see another layer and another layer and another layer. So I've got, I guess, quite an interesting imagination, or how I see things, multi-layered, multi-dimensional sort of thing in front of me. When I think about it, I can kind of see it. Yeah.
So we'll get into that a bit more, because I want you to explain some of your artwork a bit later on.
Yeah.
But if we go back to school, did you do art at school?
Yeah. I did.
And how did that go for you doing art at school? Were you like, yes, this kid's talented, but doesn't do the
doesn't apply
himself. Like, is that such a normal? There were all the things I was reading I was going back through my report cards, and they're saying exactly the same stuff.
Yeah.
JB's a very good communicating person, but if he applied himself more at his homework or schoolwork, he'd get better results.
Yes, but a lot of that also is the way that we were taught, and in our era we were taught in a single kind of way. There was no tailoring to certain students. It was like it was that way or that way.
Yep.
You go to the next teacher, they had their system of teaching,
Yep.
and if you didn't fit that, and I'm not, you're like, you've got way too much energy. You're bounced off the walls, I'm bounced off the walls. How are you going to put me like, quietly in a classroom? It's like, either let me draw or let me run. You try to teach me while I'm running around, you'll get a lot out of me.
Yeah, and I think that's changed a little bit to how the school patterns changed a little bit to accommodate maybe more people coming through. Were you ever a rapper? Like, did you ever throw out lyrics? Because there's a few things I'm not, and a singer, or like I cannot sing at all, and my rapping ability is very bad, and I pretty much can't draw as well. So I've really got a bit of a trifecta there of things I've chosen to, appreciate when I see,
yes,
appreciate when I listen, and the skill of someone that can piece together lyrics is phenomenal. And have you heard of a guy called Harry Mack? Like, this guy on Instagram is
I'll have to look him up.
He is watching people gaming, and then he just recites, goes through bars of it's incredible. I think he's amazing, and I think the skill to do that is amazing.
Yeah, I've got a lot of friends that are like that. I've got friends, especially like back in the day when freestyling was a thing that we did every other day. And when you met up on a weekend, it was at Coles Park or Blair National Park. And
hang on, what's Coles Park? Which one's that? Where is Coles Park? Is that
Coles Park up at Blackwood? I don't even know if that park's there anymore, but it was just called Coles Park, right? And that was like a meeting point. That was Friday night meeting point. You have your cart and the VB, and you just start freestyling at each other. And then someone would hear about a local party, and you'd all go there as a massive posse and rock up to a party, and then back to the park or down to Blair National Park. So we spend hours just rapping, just in circles, just guys rapping at each other non-stop. So even if you were terrible at rapping, you were kind of forced in a way, or you'd give it a go. So everyone I know at that age, more or less, we all did freestyle raps.
That is cool.
Yes.
Okay, so where did the art part come? Obviously, surely you're not rapping and doing art. Surely there was a bit of a difference, or was it all blended together back then?
Well, it would blend in a bit, because you'd have your crossover and everything. Like, I was b-boying at the same time, so breakdancing. That was a big part of it for me, the movement, the popping and locking, that kind of era of stuff. Beat Street and a few other videos with Turbo and all these other sort of dance from US, Rocksteady Crew.
And
growing up with that kind of aesthetic.
It's like Grandmaster Flash and
and all that stuff. So that era for me was like hugely influential, and actually it ended up influencing the way I paint letters drastically in the years to come. But yeah, so you'd have some guys that you'd meet up. Some guy would bring a roll of like lino. You'd find some cardboard, you'd have a little slice of lino, we'd chuck that down. The B-boys were doing that, the rappers were next to it. And then the dudes that were going to go roll off and do some tags or go and do a piece would like it'd hit a certain time, some's finished or lights are out, and go find a little spot.
So back in the day, I don't know how prolific tagging is as much as it is. It seems to be that there is some places that you can go to actually put a nice piece.
Yeah.
Art. Tagging's probably copped a bit of a bad rap. And back in the day, I had a few mates that were into it. Used to go with them. I, once again, couldn't draw anything. I would have loved to have done something, but I just had no talent at all. Not even to write something. It's so bad, in fact.
It's a lot harder than you'd imagine as well.
To get a cool style, like I want a stylist to work on my autograph, actually. Like
An autograph stylist. Oh my god.
But when people see it, they go, "Oh, that's tagging." Is there some rules and regulations for where and what can get tagged? Like, they're talking back in the day. I don't know what happens anymore, I'll be honest. But, it used to be, hey, this is my sort of area, and I would have my tag there representing.
The simple fact is, when it comes to graffiti in a true sense, there is no rules.
Yeah.
And that is the idea. And that's up for the individual to take on how they feel and how that sits within their life. But, for me personally, I considered myself a beautifier. I wasn't thinking what I was doing was like destruction. So I wanted to make things look more beautiful. And I think it pushed me to consider the colours that I was using. I wanted to be able to paint backgrounds, characters, scenery, do perfect fades. Completely sort of change the look of a spot, whether that had explicit permission or not at the time.
And was it the bigger the better, or what challenges came involved with
it? Ended up being that way.
Yeah.
But in I guess in my era, unless you could somehow come across a lot of spray paint, it was bloody expensive.
Yeah. Well,
I was a young kid, and some of the shops were selling paint for $16 a can. Now I don't know at that age, I was lucky to have $5 or 50 cents in my pocket.
Yeah, I don't know who was buying
90s.
many cans.
Yeah,
and they were always under lock and key as well. Like, I mean, this is going back a while for me touring. But if we have a look at some of the progression with some of the things you've learnt at school, like talking about Sahara and getting your lettering right.
Yeah,
what were you actually doing that in? Obviously, it wasn't. Was it in paint? Or was it?
Started just with pencil stuff.
Yeah.
And then it was sort of craypa, mixture of stuff with like Posca. I did a lot of stuff with watercolor just because it was super cheap.
Yeah.
And
that was your sort of way to be able to still express what you wanted to do.
Yeah, just learning. And then I started doing actual like pieces that were probably about 2 feet wide.
Yeah.
In like craypa. I remember doing like Hype pieces because Hype magazine came out in 1991, and I loved the word, and I was like, it's these little Hype pieces, and tune at the time.
Yeah.
So many different words that sort of all of us went through at the time until we sort of settled upon something that we really, I guess, could sink our teeth into letter-wise and structure and style. So yeah, many, many different mediums, whatever got the job done, basically.
So this day and age, everything's photographed.
Mm-hmm.
And back in the day, the police, for instance, obviously started, I can remember late in the piece, starting to get a bit of a portfolio on who that particular person was.
Yeah.
And obviously they needed to catch him red-handed to prove it was that person. In this day and age, do you think they're still using that technology to jump on people, or are people actually trying to get permission?
In some way, but I think it's just more a point of, do you want to spend money in that way when there's so, a lot of other things that actually demand that kind of budget and stuff. So, there's always going to be law enforcement on the lookout for stuff like that. And, even, there isn't any graffiti writer that would enjoy having their front fence tagged either. It's just that kind of thing. But, there's a lot of people that have grown up with like heavily steeped in that culture, and they're keeping it going in some form within them and how they feel and want to express themselves. So for me, I still have like a complete love for graffiti because I guess I see so much more to it. It is a lot more insular in a sense than how we view street art and how people look at it in this day and age. But that's mainly because people, when they look at graffiti, they either just see colour or mess, but they don't understand structurally the years it's taken to be able to handle a can, the style that they're putting forward, what it says, how they've manipulated letters to create their own style that's unique from millions of artists around the world. It's an extremely amazing skill, and there would honestly be oil painters that can paint you dead set realistic that would not be able to do a tight graffiti piece like a lot of people out there.
Yeah. And
so it's interesting. It's like it's all perspective.
I can honestly say I'm one of those, and I get the hands on a can. I'm like, yeah, and you just go to do like a line, and you're like, fuck, and it's running, and it's like, oh my god, this is a lot harder than it looks. And I got into this habit of watching, like they were doing bomb jobs where they would rock up and they'd quickly do a train or something. And it's like, they're so talented, like, not too good for the people that maybe own a train.
Yes.
But it was amazing to see how quickly they could execute their piece. And I'm assuming part of the back in the day, did you have a go-to place where you would go to do a piece? Was there somewhere?
The idea is to spread yourself out as much as you possibly can. But also there's a simple fact, if you're a certain age, you're not going to have a car. So you're going to go for as far as you can ride your BMX. You know what I mean? Or like one train and a bus and a tram away, and that you can be back on the last sort of train home sort of thing. So a lot of it really, was sort of territorial in that way. And then you understood that you'd start seeing guys from one end of the city completely to the other, and that they're old enough and they cruise around, or they've got an older brother or
got a car. So that's how you could. So you would, I'm assuming, if we're still, before we got into school here, you finished year 12. Did you do well in art at school?
I did well in what would be considered well when I was in like primary school and early sort of high school. But I probably didn't apply myself in the way that teachers wanted me to sort of from the middle of high school. I became 100% obsessed with graffiti, and everything I did had graffiti slant, graffiti style. I wanted to paint canvases with spray paint at school while I was there. I wanted to paint the art room, and I ended up doing that. I painted the lunch shed with pieces. I fucking painted half the school. And I was like, at that stage, it just got like really full on. It's like all I wanted to do, like 20. Well, it was that and basketball. That's another side of my life that's was massive for me. I grew up kind of, dreaming of wanting to be an NBA player.
Well, you were in a Jordan era, like it was.
Oh yeah.
So it was achievable.
Yeah. Well, Sunday morning was watching the best NBA game of the week, and I still got to see some, Dr. J games, and with Kareem and that kind of era and Bird playing. Because if it was the game of the week, undoubtedly it was bloody Celtics 76ers, Chicago, because Jordan or the Lakers, or Pistons.
And you're playing NBA Jam.
Yeah, a little bit. I was never a video game dude.
Wow.
I loved watching it. Like my friends were like fanatics for video games, but I always took a step back. While they were playing video games, I'd have like a pad and a pen, and I'd be either practicing script letters and just designing pieces and themes and characters. So I was very tactile. I'd just rather do that than play video.
So you have your own books now? I'm assuming you would have had some nice books. So you keep them together.
Oh, you did back in the day. It was like a big thing, like having a sketchbook.
Anymore?
No. No, like with the amount of time that would take me to do a sketch that I want to do that I used to spend doing in a book, I'd like do a piece for like 5 or 6 hours. It's like, if I've got 5 or 6 hours, I want to go paint the wall. I'm not going to sit there and do that. If I've got a chance to express myself, it's out there. So we do that. I hardly draw anything. I don't even, a lot of my sketches for doing walls, they're very quick compositions, and then it's really just finding what's happening at the wall at the time.
So in Adelaide, or maybe not Adelaide, let's say Australia.
Yep.
who do you think is like the most admired street art other than yourself? Yeah. So
I mean, I'm
like
I'm of a certain caliber, but I definitely haven't peaked in my own sense. I think because I've been around long enough and I'm still striving to get better at my craft, but I don't by any means consider myself like one of the best. I'm good at what I do, and I realise that. But I think there's a lot of other people that have just got something extra, or their talents are extraordinary. I'm just a very hard worker.
yeah.
I'm a grinder.
So who do you think? Who do you admire as an Aussie street artist? Is there someone that comes to mind that you're like, damn, that's
so
it?
many. There's
Yeah.
so many.
This might be why are you thinking of that?
Yeah.
What impact do you reckon the Everfresh crew made on Oz streets? On
Like
the Oz street art
absolutely
scene?
massive. I guess in the way that they set themselves up and they structured themselves as a collective, they kind of set the bar for Australian collectives in that kind of way, because the idea of having a crew, like from graffiti to everything else, you have a group of people that work towards a certain sort of goal, but there might only be sort of 2 or 3 people at a time working with each other. Everfresh from the start based themselves in the same building. When they did work together, they would do it together, between 5 and 10 artists at a time. And they were basically just packed themselves in and creatively worked for at least 12 hours a day, every day of the week, and then would go out at night time and put up their posters and do numerous other things all night long. So I think they just pushed so hard and so fast that it's no wonder that so many people from that collective have just excelled, but on a world scale.
Yeah.
So I mean, they're a perfect example of sort of elite.
When were they formed? Like that, they're going back a long time.
When was
it
the actual-
90s or?
It would have. I'm sure it would have been just after mid 90s.
Yeah.
Maybe like 96, 97. And there would have been a few of them that have already like either doing graffiti together or came from the same like art school and bits and pieces, and then a couple of them sort of hang out, and then a couple more meet up with each other, and then all of a sudden they're in the same studio together and producing incredible sort of stuff.
Pretty crazy that all from Australia as well. So
yeah.
Which I think when you look at what has happened with the scene here, I think the street art, like you're talking now, has been a lot more accepted in society in regards to beautifying, certain buildings or certain roads or streetscapes or
and what's deemed as something that's good for the community.
Yeah, that's exactly it, and it happens to be amazing street art.
Yeah,
and it's not necessarily pictures or portraits. It could be lines or that's with some of your stuff. We talk about crystals, how you can imagine like a crystal when you sort of move it around,
the different facets.
Yeah, that's how
where the light hits it.
And that's how I see a lot of your work, and a lot of your work that's on buildings.
Yes.
Has that style where you can see that it looks okay, and then when you mention that, it's like that totally makes sense of why, and the lighting that gives you that.
Yes, yeah, and I guess like sort of high contrast stuff, and I enjoy colourful stuff.
Yeah,
I like it. I like it punchy and vibrant, but also there's a bit of a message in why I've kind of used those sort of stronger palettes. I haven't always liked to classically take a portrait and use the correct toning as such. I've liked the idea of one of the things that I did when I left school. I did visual arts. I think I did visual arts for like 6 months. I lasted 6 months and didn't know while I was there. I just got bored. I wanted to do graffiti and run around. And so I tried my hand. I was doing a clothing label at the time called Materialism with a couple of mates. And I went to TAFE and I did pattern making and I think I lasted for 6 months doing clothing design.
Like T-shirts and stuff? Or?
Yeah, T-shirts, all sorts of stuff. I ended up being in the rag trade for 10 years and designing like boom skateboards and clothing apparel and backpacks and socks and jeans, jackets, hats, like 100 odd
really?
odd
Well,
items.
so this is back
I did that for years.
So is this in the 90s?
No, early 2000s. So I started printing my first T-shirts in end of '99, just before I went away to Europe for the first time. Yeah.
So talking about traveling, you've travelled a lot since after finishing schools. Like we've got it as around 40 countries that you've actually travelled to.
Yeah. I actually have to pull out my I think I've filled like 2 passports. I'm onto my 3rd one. So I have to kind of pull it out and remind myself, because, you know, especially when you go to Europe, it's kind of fun. You kind of feel like you're cheating. Sometimes you're like just on a train, on a fast train for an hour and 15 minutes, and you're apparently in another country, but you get that stamp. You're like, I've been to another country. But yeah, a lot of places. I started off in Europe. I actually landed in London on the 4th of January 2000 to meet up with my brother. He'd been over there for quite a while, and that ended up being just, I don't know, such a weird way to, I literally thought I was going to get to London, hang out with my brother for about a week, and we planned to go to like Chamonix to go snowboarding.
Yeah.
Because I've got like a background of like surfing, skating. I was just a part of it. Like everything sporty, active.
That's you, active, everything. Doing something.
Yeah. So yeah, rolled up. My brother literally just got kicked out of the place that he was staying because his friend's mum just turned up, and he got the boot. And because in London, there's no room. There's no room. So he got the boot. So I got to London. I went back to this place where he was staying, picked up his bag, and we walked the streets, and he just tried to call a couple of his friends to hang out. And I remember you'd travel overseas, and the first thing you'd get would be like a 2.5 bottle of spirits. You know what I mean?
Natural.
And I just remember like hocking swigs of spirits as I sort of walked around the streets for hours. Ended up crashing on the floor of like a girl's place that he worked with the first night, and the second night kind of the same, but someone else's place. And you'd just be walking around for hours. And then by the end of the week, I'd spent all my savings to go over to get a place for him and me, and I started working. I started working 70 hours in a pub. So it kind of got completely flipped. And then, yeah, ended up like sort of doing cooking and bar service for about 4 odd months before I went off to the rest of Europe to sort of regain a little bit of cash to get around. Not that you're getting paid. I mean, getting paid like
peanuts,
£4,
but
10p an hour.
It makes a difference earning their money rather than taking it.
Oh yeah, yes.
With when you went overseas for the first time, did you really start to see that the art was different all around the world? Is that something that came to light or not?
Yeah, it was the game changer for me, basically. So I got to meet up with, I guess, really amazing crew when I was actually in London and got to do a bit of painting there. But it was when I actually went out to Frankfurt and then on to Wiesbaden, there was a jam called Wall Street Meeting.
Yeah.
And it's at this place called the Schlachter. It's an old abattoir. And it was the last time that this event was going to be held at the capacity that it had normally been held at. They were going to, I think they ended up demolishing 3/4 of this abattoir. So on this one weekend, or rock up on a Friday, got the train out to Wiesbaden, and there ended up being over 5,500 graffiti writers and street artists from around the world, and a lot of the world's best in all their fields from every country going there at that time. So all my childhood superheroes, all the biggest names in Europe at the time, all their painting at the same place.
Yeah, it's cool.
Crazy.
Do you have photos and that stuff?
Absolutely mind-blowing. Yeah. Like so many photos. So I ended up painting in this like little corner. I ended up meeting up with some guys from Frankfurt and a couple of Polish guys and just random people along the way. Ended up getting quite a good spot to paint. And there was an old school French guy from Paris, Le Truc. He saw my style and he was like, I really like your stuff. Looks really unique. Like, where are you from? Yeah, I'm Australian. I was like, super gangly.
Are there any other Aussies there? Probably not.
No, not there. No, I was the only Aussie there at the time. There were other Aussies that had been to that event the year before, like maybe one. Like each year there might be one.
You're maybe the token Aussie.
I'm just the token Aussie bloke. So he said, I want to introduce you to a couple of friends of mine. And he walks me over and I'm like walking up to this wall and I'm like, holy shit, this is like Toast, Sweat, Can2, Scene, all these guys from this, like these crews that I was just like, as a kid, I was just like, these are the gods.
So you've seen them in all the hype mag, all the
in everything, all the books that I've bought. I've just spent, years studying their work, and just walks me up and just introduces me one after the other to each one of these guys. And they ended up just being super nice, like super chill, super nice. They came over and met me later, and then, when you do the whole track and walk around the whole track, it was like just the who's who.
Yeah.
The who's who. And actually a lot of the guys that are still doing the biggest works and the most kind of accomplished artists in the world, and who have gone on to be like quite high level in the fine art field, were there on that weekend. But it turned into complete mayhem by the end of the weekend.
I could imagine.
There was a train, the Wiesbaden, you got off at the train station and there was actually a yard there, and it ended up being like right with the police with about 5,000 riders, Molotov cocktails, shit on fire, and there was about 50 or 60 guys painting trains in the yard with the police watching them because it was just out of control. But just a crazy experience, just super crazy. And that was my first, I've just gone to Europe, and that's the first.
And this is what they do over here. I'm here.
Just like mind-bending. But I guess we're at the point that I wanted to make was that I just got to see that my superheroes were normal people.
Yeah.
They were real people. And sometimes you would imagine, you see the scale of the works that they'd paint and go, are they like 10 feet tall? Are they like, these like giants that do this stuff? And a lot of the time they weren't. They were tiny, except for a few of them. There was a couple of tall guys, but there was a lot of guys, and you're like, man, these dudes are just like, they're batting high. They're just going, they're all out. They're amazing. So that was like a huge, a massive influence in my life. And from that one event, I basically got invited all around Europe to be part of like either hip hop summits, street art events, or graffiti events in like all these different countries, and basically just went on a tour for like 3.5 months.
So to get invited to that, you obviously have to be invited by someone. I'm assuming it's someone in the group, or you can't. Yeah, you just rocked up and got lucky.
Yeah, I got lucky, but
it's the right place, right time, huh?
Even the people that were the organisers of these events, because this was the last one, they were all there as well. So they got to see my artwork, and they're like, "Yeah, come out." Or one of the graffiti writers. I remember a guy from New York, like a really famous graffiti artist, T-Kid. He took me under his wing. We caught each other's eyes a couple of times and just chatted a few times while we're out in Germany. And he was like, come and paint in Vienna with me. Come and do this. I'll get you on this event. And then I'd end up going to these places and painting with these other really amazing artists. And it just kept on snowballing from place to place. And then...
cool style, T-Kid.
Yeah. Really, really full on.
Right.
But old school, like as well. Like he's
school.
Been doing it since the 70s. And then, how I said that I met a guy named Toast.
Yep.
He was from a crew called TWS in Switzerland.
I can't look up Toast because I'm assuming that nothing's going to come up. I know it will come up, a whole lot of bread.
or Toast. Maybe you can put in Toast One Graffiti, and you might see something. But he's an art super freak. If you ask anyone in the world in my field about Toast One, especially coming from graffiti and the type of stuff that he painted, he's like just a super freak. He can use any medium and be better at you than any medium. He's just nuts. So it was funny. I met him when we were in Wiesbaden. Yep. And he said, if you ever come back to Europe, stay in touch, and you can come out to Basel and stay with me. We'll hang out.
And you're like...
So then the next time I go back to Europe, I'm back there 2 years later, I hit him up, and we'd been staying in contact ever since. And he's like, well, come stay at my place. And I think that was maybe the most defining period in my career, because that was the time that I got to see an artist that loved his graffiti, could do all this different stuff. He was fine art trained, incredibly talented in every direction. He had a graphic design studio. He had 10 people working under him, but he spent most of his days, sort of half of his days, he'd go for a walk to a pool or go down to the river. He'd go do a little piece. He'd stay in touch with something, and then he'd just have his Mac laptop, right? Just cruise around with his Mac laptop, sit down, and he'd punch out these incredible designs, hit send, boom, that's off to a client somewhere, get this website finished up, whatever else. And I was like, is this what you do? Is this your life? Living just in a sick place. And I was just like, holy shit, I want to do that. That was the moment where I was like, I'm going to try to model the idea. I'd love to be able to do that. I'd love to get to the point to work for myself, to push the things that I love and just do that. So I just chipped away for years, and until I was sort of walking around choosing what I wanted to do with my Mac laptop in my bag.
So that's so cool. And every single person that's come on here has basically had a situation where they have put themselves out and have reaped the benefit of reaped it in spades, because they've actually gone and put themselves outside of their comfort zone or in that sort of environment. And that's exactly what you've done. And interestingly, with this guy, he draws toast as well. Like he actually draws like pieces of toast with like legs and stuff like that. Like it's quite a cool style.
But there's like a whole he's got books that are out, but it's under his actual name, Atta Toast Bizarchi. But yeah, he's got multiple books.
So when you mean fine art, what did you say? You said fine art?
I mean, fine art, like classically trained.
There is obviously, you have a core street artist that's had probably no fine art training.
Yeah, heaps.
Yep.
Heaps just sort of come from graffiti backgrounds. There's a handful of people now that come straight from fine art training, but they've done graffiti, gone into fine art training, and then when they come out the other end, they're like unbelievable, because they understand art in such a way, but they've already got the ability to use the tools before they went in there.
Yeah. So is it kind of like, it's a bit harder with more creative. It's kind of like getting a degree in something specific to potentially you're meant to know more about it.
Yeah.
Technically.
Yes.
Like that's the aim.
Yeah. And just understand your aesthetic and why you're doing it, have, I guess, your themes and a lot more understanding behind why you are doing what you're doing, rather than just like whipping something up and not understanding why it's, I don't know if this works or not.
Yeah.
They're like, everything I do has meaning and they know it works.
Yeah. And so if you go over, so you're talking a long time ago when you were overseas.
Yep.
And you're learning with like your idols. It's like anything. If you talk about, we just recently had a guy called Ving Zhang, and he talked about he does public keynotes now, but he's a magician, Adelaide guy.
Okay.
And he talked about surrounding yourself with the top 5 people are like 20% of each of them is you, and it's so true. So if you want to change your scenario, your situation, your surroundings, you should go and put yourself out with people that you either aspire to or want to learn from. And you've just literally walked into a whole bunch of like the best graffiti artists on the planet and put yourself in a situation where you can absorb something from each of those.
Yeah.
And it's so true. I think you have to get there to do it.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, when I was a young kid, my way of putting myself in that room was standing 5 meters back from Cab 101 or from Massacre or Rank or anyone from the TDC crew.
Yep.
Watching guys at like a far superior level in the way that they paint their line work and the finishing quality of their work. CSI crew, a lot of the guys who just did super proficient graffiti from like way back, they'd still be considered like highly good at what was painted 30 years ago to what's going on now. So just taking that into perspective, you're 30 years ago producing the same style, or maybe not same style, but the same skill level as what's produced now. So is that what you're saying? I'm saying some of the guys that I was watching paint and looking at, they have like had such a high level back in the day that it's comparable to stuff that's done now.
Yeah.
And they were the guys that I was interested in watching. And if I ever got to see them paint like on Rundle Street, do you remember that old basketball court where the Liberty wall was on Rundle Street? You ever remember that?
Rundle Street, yeah, I'm with you.
There used to be this sort of vacant lot, a building that was knocked out. It ended up becoming like a 3-on-3 basketball court, and there's like a Liberty wall, and there was a painting of like a Felix the cat there, and all this stuff. The guys that used to paint that, if I'd ever catch them painting, I'd just stand there for hours if I could and just watch what they were doing and like study what caps they were putting on the cans, what brands of paint, how their body mechanics were, how they were moving, how fast they were doing things, their color combinations, all these techniques. Like I was just an absolute sponge.
I was going to say your tag should have been Sponge. It's got some cool lettering too. Like, the S, I think
the S dollar sign. Yes. Yeah. The S dollar sign.
Yeah, that's why I'm not an artist. Totally why I'm not an artist. I'll give you the red hot tip. Talk about watching art.
Yeah.
They talk about, they talk about like, you sit there and look at watching paint dry. It's not a good term, but you can sit there and watch an artist do portrait or a wall piece, or is there something recently that you've actually watched and thought, that made me feel like I'm alive again?
I think watching the guys who paint off the ground with like roller poles and extensions that are put together, or 7-meter poles, and they dip the paintbrush in a little bucket 7 meters away and then prop it back up, and like watching my mate Hitness paint from Italy, like it's so crazy. Like he'll sit on like an A-frame ladder, a 7-meter A-frame ladder at the top with a 7-meter pole with a tiny little brush on the end of it, and dip it and then pull it back up, and he's just doing, looks like his hands just squiggling around, and he's doing this like craziest artwork, all this technical sort of watercolor painting, all this layered stuff. Yeah, half the time he'll do stuff like that from like ground level, all this like mad stuff. So there's a whole bunch of artists that I think these days, when I see the guys doing work with brushes and other techniques, because I understand the aerosol stuff, I'm like all over that side of things. So when I'm watching something that I know that I couldn't do, I think I get totally bedazzled. And when it comes to that kind of physicality and just understanding your craft so well and being dialed in with an extension that's 7 meters long. Imagine having to 7 meters away from you.
No,
you're not out from the wall. You're directly underneath it, so you're hardly seeing. You're not seeing it from straight on. You've got to guess that perspective and keep that line work on and keep those layers going. It's freaky.
It's definitely not me. But while we're talking about walls,
yeah,
you had I don't know if you helped run or you ran the Wonder Walls, which was
Port Adelaide was my baby.
Was that your first? Was that your first movement into a wall style festival?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Look, it was something that I wanted to do for about a decade, and it comes off the back of exactly what I was talking to you about while I was in Europe. I'm going to all these festivals. I'm a part of these festivals. I'm seeing the best artists in the world painting at them. And I'm like, this has inspired me so beyond. I never would have got to the level that I've got to unless I'd actually been able to witness these people painting, see their technique, see what they're doing, and be able to talk to them. I wouldn't have had the confidence, or it would have taken me a lot longer to wrap my head around bringing that kind of scale of painting walls to Australia.
Yeah.
And then I was like, at some stage, if I've got a chance to do it, I want to be able to bring the world's best here, and hopefully that has a flow-on effect like it did with me, and we'd start like a really strong movement locally.
Yeah,
and that was the whole idea.
Yeah. Okay, and that first one was like 2017?
15.
2015.
Yeah.
And did you get any big names like say, we'll see you there, Vans? Did you?
Yeah, biggest names at the time. Etum crew were kind of like the biggest thing in street art at the time in 2015. They're still like.
Who are they? Hello?
Etum crew, ETAM, 2 guys from Poland. Saner and Best.
Crazy stuff.
Crazy.
Yeah.
They're like amazing. When they work together, they're called Etam, but they do a lot of solo work as well. But they're the guys that I had paint one side of that old Marine Harbours building, the 10-story wall there.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, I had Askew and Deus from New Zealand, who are like crew members of that I'm in the same crew as them, TMD.
TMD.
The most dedicated.
That's pretty cool. That's actually pretty apparent.
Yeah. So there's a whole collective of incredible artists in New Zealand, and there's 3 artists from Germany that are part of that collective, and then another artist from Australia, Soffles, that you would have heard about. He's part of TMD as well. So
oh my God.
It's a crazy collective.
I've got to say, can I say a Soffles story?
Yeah.
All right. So I've got a mate, Ben. He's he loves listening to the podcast. He's actually sent through lots of questions for you. Right?
Okay.
And we rocked up to that same place I bought my piece, and he was just in awe. Soffles was there.
Published Art House.
Yeah, published at the Published Art House. That's right.
Which is what I put together.
Yeah, no shit.
Yes. So that whole tag and that logo, that name, that came through me and working with like Peter Buick. He let me sort of go hard in what was like the old car park, and we turned it into Published Art House.
And it was fucking cool.
Yes.
Like, and I got, because what people didn't see there was all the part you couldn't see. There was where half the dudes were staying.
Yes.
So it was some intense graffiti through the place. Like, there was this guy.
Because I brought the Iron Lac crew over. That show was like to bring out the Australian Iron Lac crew, and that's why we all painted that wall at the end, and then we all had like canvases and other stuff that
you had your stuff that you had to hang up, and there's a piece there. My mate was just staring at it wasn't as clear cut as some of the Soffles pieces these days.
Yes.
It was like, it looked like a bit of an alien thing.
Yeah,
and in the end, he was in love with it. And we came back to it, had a red thing on it, and he's like, oh fuck, he was never gonna fucking buy it.
Yeah.
So I bought it for him for his birthday.
Oh, sick.
And he just said to me, he said, look, I don't have a place for that now, and I said, I'll keep it. You tell me when you got the place. And a few years ago, he rang me up and he said, I've got the room, so awesome. I've got a place, and I gave it to him as a tearful moment. But that made me check into Soffles. Soffles is fucking killing it right now from what I've seen in what he produces and what you see on Instagram and stuff like that.
He's like a 1 in a billion.
He is crazy, huh?
He's not like 1 in a million. He's like a 1 in a billion. There's only literally, when I talk about certain like leagues of artists who are like sort of crossover between finer art or muralism and graffiti, Toast was one of those guys that everything he touched was like gold. Softs is like just a super freak. He's the equivalent of 3 human beings in one, and I've only really met maybe one person who can paint as fast but not as proficient as him. He paints with both hands very, very proficiently, and he's got an ability that I've never seen in another artist. And it's like he's got an image loaded in his head, and he can paint like almost like a printer in a sense, that it already knows what file is coming out. And there's so many times I watch him paint and he's not even looking at the wall. He'll have a conversation and he's just he'll just be, and then all of a sudden this thing just like comes out of the wall and you're like, holy shit, dude. He's like a super freak. Never seen anything like it. And that's why he's, obviously become so popular in many ways. And he's got so far to go as well. Like every time he just applies himself at like a new skill set, he can perfect it. Like he's crazy. We haven't seen the best of what he can do. He'll spend the next 10 years getting even better and just blowing people away.
So I don't know how old he is, but is there a age with artists where you think that where they get better or mature, or I don't know,
Well, they say for artists that the real maturing in a fine art sense, and when they go back through history, that the mid 40s is supposed to be like the sweet spot. But in terms of graffiti, that sweet spot is probably more in your 30s to mid 30s, 30 to 35, because you still have the vitality. Once you get to like 40, 45, your body just starts going, oh, mate, I can't handle this. I can't stay out as long. I can't be bothered painting as long. You've got all sorts of like funny injuries and RSI with your hand. And
because it is punishing.
It's much more punishing than you'd ever imagine. And even, you've got these handheld spray guns and things that you're holding above your head, away from your body for hours in a day. And there's times, there was this job that I did in Port Pirie, and I was using the spray gun, and my hand locked onto the spray gun, and my arm collapsed in like a robotic collapse, like and locked in, and I was stuck there for half an hour, just locked in my body. I couldn't do anything, couldn't pull it out. It was stuck.
Is this real?
Yeah, completely like muscle locked. So you just cook yourself. We all damage your fingers, like the nerve endings on your fingers from the nozzles. There's, I guess, a lot of, to do your back, knees, shoulders, the type of movement, the jumping around, the climbing. It's pretty hardcore.
Fucking injuries. And that's not being chased by the cops.
No. That's after dark.
We're talking about Wonderwalls.
Yes.
Down at the port.
Yep.
And I believe there's still beautiful art left there from...
Yeah, well, we ended up doing 2015, yes. 2017, 19 and 20.
And 220?
Yeah.
No, you didn't. When did you do that?
I got within the day. The Monday after was the...
COVID.
Time to... or the following week.
No shit.
Yeah, that was it.
Because and anyone that knows at the port, there's massive pieces down there now.
Yeah, there's still more than 75 works standing from Wonderwalls festivals alone.
That is freaking awesome. And talking about getting festivals, you've brought some rock stars to Adelaide,
yes.
Which is such a, Adelaide's underrated. Like it bats above its weight in many, many ways.
Yeah, it does.
And you got a new event you're putting on, the Big Picture Fest.
Yes.
So talk us through.
My baby.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about the Big Picture Fest. And I'm assuming it's got something to do with big pictures at a festival.
Yeah, it's pretty obvious, isn't it? It's like
I
tried to keep it pretty simple.
All simple people like me understand. I'm in.
Yeah. I mean, it's got that twofold sort of thing. It's talking about in the sense of the bigger picture in life, and obviously lends itself to just seeing large scale pictures on walls, so hence the name. It's a very artist driven festival, so I guess there's been a lot of festivals that go for more artists and maybe less pay, whereas I went for less artists and appropriate pay. So that was sort of my model for Big Picture Fest. So I'd condense the amount of artists so that we could look after artists really well, that they'd be paid appropriately for the work that they're doing, and keep it, quite insular and just keep it moving, chop away the fat away from a festival.
Yep.
It doesn't always have to have all the massive bells and whistles, but at the end of the day, you're going to be left with 12 to 15 hardcore pieces in the street.
So whereabouts? You've just had one?
I did, but I'll start in 2018. I started in Frankston, actually.
Yep.
Rolled out one in Frankston, and then in the following year we did in Frankston again, and then I ended up doing one in Port Pirie.
Port Pirie?
Did Pirie.
So what made you pick Port Pirie?
It was funny. I ended up getting a commission down there and painted a large wall down there myself. And then I was just talking to council and said, look, I'm doing Big Picture Fest. If there's an opportunity to get funding for something like this down the line, let's say we'll do like a smaller version of it. We ended up having 6 artists, and most of them kind of local. and let's roll something out here and see if we can get a little bit of interest drummed up around it. So we did Port Pirie, and then the following year I teamed up with Sala, and I had artists painting across 10 council areas. Teamed up with 10 councils and rolled out a big picture times Sala during that whole month of Sala Festival.
So why aren't you doing this? Why are they not letting you do this like in Adelaide City?
You never know. It's around the corner.
Ah.
You never know. But what I just finished was the Newcastle Festival. So I teamed up with an amazing lady, Becky, from Newcastle Afoot. We worked on getting some funding together, and we just rolled out an incredible week over in Newcastle. Just two weeks ago, we finished up. So yeah, it was amazing, and it was quite unique for Newcastle because it was the first time that I literally couldn't have an international artist come and paint on Big Picture Fest.
Yep.
I'd had like big namers, like 2 or 3 big namers on each one of the Big Picture Fests, especially in like Frankston. Each year we always have like 2 or 3 internationals sort of come out for that. Last year we had world-renowned guys Pitchy and Arvo, known as Pitchy Arvo, and another artist named Vesod. Have a quick look at Vesod from Turin, Italy. Vesod, Vesod, and what he does is just so mind-blowing. So another thing that I like to do, I like to try to pick up. I like to pick up international artists when I feel like they're really at the height of their career.
Or is this? No, that's not it. What do you got?
Vesod Street Art.
Yeah, what? Oh, okay, Vesod.
Like crazy. Right. Anyway, so yeah, he was over in. I ended up having them.
Bam. Okay.
Yeah, had them over here for Wonderwalls.
Than
and then I took them over to Frankston, and they painted in the Frankston Big Pitch Fest earlier this year. And it's so crazy. Like I've ended up I put on 3 festivals this year during COVID, and I'm one of the only people that's managed to get them out. Everyone else had to cancel because of the timing of their festivals. And
your timings just slid in.
Even to the point that, for me to go to Newcastle, the borders only opened the Thursday before. I had to go there on the Sunday. The Thursday before it opened up, so that I could actually be at my own event.
So when we look at up and coming artists, that have that style that you've been talking about, is there anyone in particular that comes to mind that you see as up and coming? As that's actually like you mentioned Soffles. But maybe he's not up and coming. So
he's definitely not up and coming. But I mean,
while we're talking about Soffles, there's that piece that I said that looked like it was following him around. I was trying to figure out what it was.
Yeah, hyperlapse.
Yeah, hyperlapse, and that piece. Who actually did that?
Selena Miles.
So that's Selena Miles'
together.
piece,
yes.
And I won't lie, we watched a little bit of it before. It's freaking unbelievable.
Yes.
And we'll overlay it so we can see it, even if we have this as a snap for sure. But
yeah.
when we talk about how that was done, can you talk me through how the hell that was actually filmed? Do you know?
So, yeah, meticulously, especially with the initial ones that she did of Soffles and the boys, she meticulously moved it an inch by inch at a time and adjusted the height of just a simple tripod like this. There was no sort of running tracks and all the tricks that, producers would use now. It was on the fly. She had to move it every 90 seconds, and the scenes with all the artists painting, they just had to paint continuously, and if she moved past them, then they'd miss it. So they'd have to paint extremely fast and to a time limit. It's like, I'm going to be on that end over there in 5 minutes. You have to have this whole section painted and just move around a spot. So they ended up, I think they filmed that particular one we were having a look at over a month in a factory in Brisbane.
A month?
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, it's unbelievable. The footage is awesome. And it's fair to say that's where I sort of seen that piece that follows Soffels around for a piece.
Yeah, that's a different one, but that's the one in Melbourne.
Yeah, one in
Still
Melbourne.
Selena.
Like looks like he's riding a bike and then piece and it goes around a corner and it's like a one. What's it called when it's all one
take?
One
take.
Take.
Just all in one take.
Extremely cool, and I think a great way to show off some art. I think in that street art and that style.
Well, it gives it the kind of more true essence of the sort of where it came from and the more illegal sort of guerrilla side of street art. And when it sort of first went up, it's like you've got to get it done quickly, and there's a lot of energy to it. It's like rushing up to a spot, it's running out of a spot, and always on the move. So I think it captures that perfectly.
And it kind of does catch a back in the day when you'd have to do a piece exceptionally quick.
Yeah.
Or you would get caught.
Yeah. Or you're lucky or just very smart or whatever it was.
So obviously, we've come a long way in regards to seeing some of the art that's happened that's you've been involved with, and you've been involved with some of the biggest players on the planet. What's even better is if you've brought them here to South Australia.
Yeah.
And
massive part.
And I'm assuming once they're here, I'll put money on they've enjoyed what happens here in SA. Like we have a pretty cool place to go.
We do. Probably the one thing that's really hard when you have like an international superstar come down, they're already booked for a job 3 days later. So you kind of hope that they get their work done on time and you can take them out into the bush somewhere or take them to a winery or just show them a different side of things. But, when we were talking about Sainat and Best coming down, the Etam guys in 2015, I think the weekend we finished up, we did it in January that year. And it was bloody hot. It was like 39 degrees every day at least. And they left on, I think, towards the end of January. We hung out and played beer pong. We played a game of cricket in the street down at Glenelg and took them to the beach. And they just had an incredible time. And I think that really stuck with them because they, especially coming from Poland, like Warsaw, really cold Eastern European place. That was the hottest that they'd painted in, like
freezing,
it was pretty extreme. So, we try to show them a good time and take care of them when they're down. Yeah.
We talk about some of the things that you've done. Your mural Oasis, you're involved in that in November in 2019. Yeah. 2019 in Nevada.
Yeah. Craziest project I've ever been on. It just was mind-boggling.
So there are 34 mural artists from around the globe.
Yeah, and literally a lot of the best of what's going around the world. So it was crazy. It was so funny. At the time, they rolled it out in 3 sections, and I think there was maybe only like 5 to 7 artists in the first series of it. They rolled out a lot of these really massive outdoor pieces at this one particular spot in Prim, Nevada. And I reckon when that video content went out all around the world, every single artist in the field was like, oh my God, I'd love to get the opportunity to have a go at this. Everyone, like 100% of the arts people in my field would be like, I would love to be invited to that project. And then they had like a second series. And I was like, oh my God, it's just stepping up like another notch. And then, I got the invite to go along and really seize the opportunity. I sort of went there with the goal in mind to paint the best things that I'd ever done. So and I think I achieved that from my personal point
obviously
of view.
People can't see this, but with that one particular, was 127 murals done throughout a mall.
It's like a massive kind of strip mall, and what they did, they stripped all the billboards on the outside back to white, so there was hardly any advertising left. I mean, they had 7-story billboard walls on the outside, and then they just became canvases for like the top street artists around the world. And every artist painted between 2 to 3 artworks, and I painted 3 works, a 4-story internal wall, like it's really big, like 4-story internal, and then I did another wall on the outside, which was 4 stories high by 38 meters long. So the equivalent of like a 9-story wall.
So getting the perspective right for that, obviously that takes a lot of skill. Like alone, if I've got a whole level here,
Yeah.
I'm assuming this is part here.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if you can see that, but they're getting the eyes and that takes a certain amount of skill.
There's a lot of kind of tricks around it now, and you do have to use some form of a grid to sort of know where you're going. And then it sort of comes down to your skill of actually being able to get an eye right or the tilt of lines, because you can make mistakes very easily in large scale.
Yeah.
And, I used to paint these immaculate like square grids, either a metre by a metre or 50 by 50, depending on like the scale of the painting. And if you were across a really wide wall, you'd count down. So you'd be on this like crazy angle and you'd count down. I'm like, oh, I'm heading, that hand goes 7 blocks across. So that finger travels 7 blocks. Sometimes you just miss one.
To change the whole perspective.
And then you'd come down and be like, oh my God, you just got this like, I'm way off. Or just get some part of it, just be really tight at some stage, and you come down and like the eye dropped or something happened, because you can't even see what's going on over there on really big scale sometimes. So kind of, once you've made those mistakes a couple of times at that scale, then you don't sort of stuff up. But very quickly I turned back to a different technique called like a squiggly grid, and I sort of just paint symbols and letters and funny throw-ups and just eyes and just funny stuff.
So is that to break up, or
that becomes the grid?
Yeah, okay.
To get the perspective, and then it's up to you then to take a photo completely straight on.
Yep.
Once you've taken it straight on, then you superimpose your design over the top of that.
So I'm assuming you're using like an iPad, or like I'm assuming you're putting all that out to once you get the idea of what you want.
Yes.
Yeah, you're not randomly. When was the last time you randomly went up to a wall and started doing something?
Every wall has like at least half of it is completely random. Yeah, hell yeah.
That's so cool.
Because for me, like I might have like the bones of something. Like I might have, I know the position of where a face or something is going to go, but I need to be in the space and be informed by the space in the environment around. Sometimes someone might walk along and be like, man, their clothes are just the craziest colours. Look at that combo. And they'll be like, oh, that's going in the painting now. Or like a bird just sort of drops in and I'm like, that's the combination. And now I'm going to do the pattern. A bug will land on me and I'll be like, look at the freaking pattern on the back of that beetle. That's going in there. And that's how it happens for me. Yeah. I really take a lot of cues from the natural surrounding around me, and then that ends up going in it. So I've never, ever painted something that's more or less designed how it is from the start. The closest thing to me painting something comprehensive that I actually had like almost like a full design for was the big one in Nevada.
Yeah.
That's the closest that I've ever come to just not freestyling. And it was mainly because we had to do 3 large-scale works, and I had a certain dead time. You're like getting on that plane at that date, that's sort of 2.5 weeks' time, and you just have to get it done. So I was like, I just want to know exactly what I'm doing and just go up and smash it out.
So talking about places, what's the weirdest place you've done a large piece in?
Weirdest?
Or craziest, weirdest?
Oh, it's
a funeral home during a funeral places. Or something.
Oh no,
something unusual, or a place like somewhere's a bit weird.
Yeah, like I guess like sort of the random countries, or like dropping something in the Valley of the Kings in Egypt and painting in Jerusalem, and just there's so many different places that I've just sort of ended up and had the opportunity to paint at, and some of the most beautiful places, like painting out at like Moorea in Tahiti and all this other stuff. So you're like painting, you turn around, you're in paradise.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Old war bunkers or just ruins that you find, and all sorts of places.
So do you drive somewhere and you go, oh shit, that looks cool, like you're in the outback Australia here, and there's like a banged up shed or something, you're like, oh, that'd be a cool place to put something? Must go through your mind all the time? Or
it does. You still have this, like, we've got this switch where, like, walls are just like this beacon. Beep, 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 beep. You're like, oh, there's a wall. Get so excited about, like, just a stupid wall space. You're like, oh, my God, I'm just, like,
Yeah, like, do you get
peaking.
excited when you see a wall like that?
Yeah, because as soon as I walked in, I was like, oh, that needs a painting on it, doesn't it? That one definitely needs a painting on it. And I started, like, messing around with the foam. I'm like, oh, the foam's, like, not straight. And I'm like, oh, I'm trying to, oh. Yeah.
We might actually put
I've got a bit
up.
of OCD when it comes to some stuff
we
like
might
that.
actually hit you up for that one day. In regards to artists, Banksy, like, seems to have a knack of putting pieces politically, or not politically, but seems to have a knack of getting things in certain places. Pretty cool style. What do you?
Well, when you're a multi-millionaire, you get to do things like that. Yes, you can employ construction companies to put up a fake wall in front of something and have someone covertly, a team of people on the other side of the world covertly put up your cut stencils and, get a picture of it the next day and be like, wow, look at this.
Do you think it's him doing stuff anymore?
Occasionally he does.
Yeah.
Occasionally he does.
So exit through
he still cuts his own stencils.
Exit through the shop. Was it shop?
Gift shop.
Gift shop?
Yeah.
That's him, huh?
What do you mean?
Like the person in it that you don't see. Is that?
Some. Parts of. Yeah, some.
Yeah.
Some.
It's
He's always teamed up with people.
He's
so we
rarely
had to
ever
by himself.
That Banksy does New York.
Yeah.
That 30-day marathon of something every day, which was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Do you think that'd be a cool thing to do?
Like myself?
Yeah.
Yeah,
like you
can only get away with that
Vans does Adelaide.
It's a hit. You just have to have like a crazy name to pull off stuff like that and to get the hype around it.
Yeah.
Because realistically, anywhere we travel, if we're traveling to do art, you're painting every day, and you paint during your festival. You paint when you finish the festival with other locals, and you go up for something cheeky before or whatever. It's like non-stop painting. So we kind of are doing that. It's just not advertised.
Yeah. Who do you think's got the best line control
with
street art?
With
spray paint. Yeah.
Ooh,
so it's obviously gonna offend a few of your friends with an answer here, but in general, it doesn't have to be one person. It is an art, and I think when you actually see people do it, I think it's mind blowing how amazing.
There's, say, at certain eras, there's been certain guys, like back in the day, it was like Murder from Melbourne. Like he was the dude. He could just control the line work so perfectly, and you had to sort of get it perfect the first time around. A lot of the artists back in the day, they didn't keep on going back over a line to get a thickness or whatever. It was just first hit, and that's how it lays. So I've got a lot of respect for, I guess, that kind of line value when it's just done first off.
Yeah.
There's a lot of European artists, and a friend of mine does. From the Netherlands, and he's like another one of the sort of super freak like line control. He's got amazing ability, but there's so many now.
Yeah.
There's so many comparable people at certain skill levels. I'm known for my cleanliness in the way that I paint and my line value as well. But I know now, I've probably just tipped my peak. I have to try a little bit harder to keep it steady. And occasionally when everything's going right, I'll still punch out some perfect lines.
So seeing art in Australia, who do you think is literally everywhere in Australia for an artist? Murder, just out of curiosity, Murder, was that person killed anyone?
No.
Okay.
No, definitely very well-natured man. Yes, family man. Just a killer star. Yes.
Boom, there it is.
I guess someone who's sort of everywhere is your Rones, people like your Rones, Adnate. Georgia Hill, she's one of my favourite artists from New South Wales. She's just on she's everywhere now, and just doing some of the larger scale. She's probably done the most consistent large scale works in Australia in the last 2 years.
Okay.
She's amazing artist, and I've had her down with my festivals in Big Picture and Wonder Walls in South Australia as well. There's a lot, but in Adelaide, I just want to mention Jasmine Crisp in Adelaide. She's sort of like one of my hot favorites.
Hot favorites. It's
just doing really amazing work out on the street at the moment. And then there's just the consistent group of friends who have been doing consistently good work for the last 10 to 20 years, who are all still doing it. There's a lot of talent here, and a lot of the talent 20 years ago, 25 years ago, a lot of the guys moved to Melbourne, had families, and then moved back to Adelaide. So there's a lot of people returning or having kids and then coming back out of retirement in a sense. And so there's a lot of amazing talent here. Crazy. So
what's next for Vans, the Omega? Joel, you got a million names. So what do you think? What do you got? 2020's been an interesting year for most people. You've been quite fortunate by the sounds of it.
Yeah, I'm not going to complain about 2020. There's a lot of people that have had really, really tough things to work through. I find myself in a fortunate position to have, my name and my abilities to carry me over that line as such. But what's coming up for me is, I want to do maybe less painting projects in a way, less larger scale stuff. I'd like to be able to get into the studio at some stage, because I don't do that. I don't utilize that as a practice. I would like to attempt to create some stuff that I've never painted before. And
hang on, what you never, as in things or different styles?
Different styles.
Okay.
Sculpture.
Yeah. Okay.
Animation.
I watched Ghost the other night.
Oh yeah.
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 And they did that pottery scene.
Yes.
Is that the sort of...
yes, but without Patrick Swayze sleazing over my back. Yeah, minus Patrick Swayze.
Okay. All right, fair enough. But so you... is this the reinvention of, hey, I want to just learn more and more and more?
No, it's not reinvention at all. It's all the stuff that I just put on the back burner.
Yeah, okay.
I've been very focused as a father with my... children, so I've tried to organise a lot more things where I can be at home, and then when I go out and do a job, I'm super focused. 5-10 years ago, I'd get to a wall and be fart-assing around and wondering what I might do, and you feel like you'd had all the time in the world. I might spend 12 hours at the wall in a day, and now I'm bang, I'm going there, I'm setting up, I'm just crunching it out. But with the still proficiency and skill level, it's just I set myself up, and it's the organisation behind and organising myself very proficiently that's can really get you, the ability to do things in a much, timelier fashion, which has been a godsend, because then I can still be home to cook meals for my family at 5:30, which is nice.
Cook?
I love cooking.
Are you the main cook of the house?
Yeah, I love cooking. I don't feel like it's a chore at all. I love every part of it. I love the smell, the sensation, the chopping part. I make art out of the food before it goes into the pan. I'm always like, oh, that looks sick. Look at that, the way that noodle's made that line. I can put that into a design. I'm looking at the dissection of the grape and the seed. Oh, that's got all this membrane around it. It's got all this stuff going on. That would look so sick inside a pattern of as repetition. And I'm just geared that way. I find the beauty in everything, basically.
We talk about some of the work that you've done. Do you have any, is there a chance for younger people to learn off you other than watching or, seeing you? And you're such a accommodating person. I'm assuming if some kid comes up to you, you'll definitely talk and give them advice. If there's some piece of advice you could give to a, God help them, a 15-year-old Vans Omega, if there's something you could tell them and they were really keen in the art space, what sort of advice would you be likely to give?
Well,
So you're so much more knowledgeable now. I don't know how old you are, but you're probably near 40, and you've probably learnt so much from life that you can give them some sound Van's Omega advice right here.
Well, I think the main thing would be not to be scared of making mistakes. Out of every mistake, you'll find something that you can take away from that and turn into a win. And to trust your instincts and really follow your passion and your heart no matter what. I always say to young people, you have to be very one-eyed when it comes to your chosen field. So, you've got to realize what is the fat in your life and start chopping it away in a certain way and really hone in on what you want to get out of something, because at the end of the day, it's pure effort. It's effort and work before it becomes effortless.
Very sound words, Sam. When you talk about now, I think you look at now, you're loving what you're doing at the moment.
Yeah.
You're in a lucky space, I'm guessing, which gives you can support a family or your family as well, but you get to do something you absolutely love. So you technically you don't think you work, do you?
This is an interesting one, because I don't want people to have the misconception that, I wake up happy. I wake up, let's go. What an amazing opportunity. Let's get stuff done. Like, that's how I'm geared. I like working. But I start off like working so many shit jobs, terrible, terrible jobs that I'd never wish upon anyone to actually have to do. Like all day labor intensive things that are just painful and are in dark rooms, or filled with chemicals, in cold rooms, all sorts of things that you just don't enjoy, aren't enjoyable at all. So when I had the opportunity to just follow my creative path, I just worked my ass off. And there are days where it feels like very hard work, but I still know that's just a process. And then the next day you're rewarded by that process of working hard, and it turns into something else. Even if you don't get a good sleep at night and you're up there doing something that you love, sometimes you're painting a section of something, and I've painted 30 colors into this dynamic eye and everything is absolutely perfect. And the one time I haven't just test sprayed like a dot out of a spray to do the white highlight at the end, and I've gone like that, and it's dried over in summer, and the spray's gone off in 3 or 4 different directions and just wrecked the eye in like one dot. And you're like, that's going to take me 2 hours to get it back, and it'll never look as good as what I just had painted it. Stuff like that still happens. It's those little times of attention or being really tired or fatigued. So I'd say sometimes you've got to understand when to stop and walk away when you're at a certain attention or fatigue, especially with artwork or anything that you're doing, or turn your attention to a part of your artwork that if you made a mistake in that area, it would be a lot easier to fix.
Well, one of the things was, what do you do when you make a mistake? Like, it's not like, is it like getting the liquid paper out? Oh shit, we can cover that. No, like we sit there and put a different color. Like, have you sat there and go, oh shit, that finger's too long? Or
well, sometimes you do like a cheeky, and you might be like, oh, maybe I just put a big blob shine over this. It might be something that you can get away by doing another technique. But sometimes, for example, when I paint, there's some points in my paintings where there's a convergence of 10 to 15 colours that all hit a single point. And you imagine if you've got like this much space on a wall and you do it wrong, you don't have one colour to fix up. You've got the 20. But then you've got every edge of every one of those colours and drying time in between to get that right. So you might be like, oh, maybe there's a floating shape over this now. Maybe JP's duck's going over this bit right now. Sometimes you weigh things up and you're like, I'm literally just going to fall over and I just want to walk away from this wall if I can't, correct it quicker than having to go back. And then there's other times where meticulously I'll spend half a day just fixing up that thing that just happened in a flash. And sometimes you're up two stories higher and you've got you work with a spray gun or something else, and some parts of it clog up or loosens, and just a squirt of paint just comes out of the machine in like some weird direction, and you look down, you're like, it's got drips over like whole sections of your work, and you're like, wow, I guess I'm repainting that whole section when I get down to the ground.
Well, I think everyone can relate. I think everyone can relate to that in their own, maybe not with art. I mean, some people, Well, just recently, Ollie, we do supplier videos where they pay us. We do it. We try to do a bit of a video, and occasionally the footage gets deleted, doesn't it, Ollie? Yeah.
By accident.
Yeah, by accident. But, everyone has that day. I mean, well, I think if you look at the works of like Lister, for instance, he's made an art form of paint dripping from
a lot of mess. Yes.
Fair to say there is a bit of controversy around him now, but he's an artist that's sort of exploded from Australia.
Yeah, and done a lot of stuff all around the place.
All overseas as well. And it's one of those things of putting yourself out there, and you've clearly put yourself out there. You have pieces all over the country, and I dare say the world.
Yeah.
What has been the most exciting job that you've been involved with? No, not job, mural that you've been, or piece that you've been involved with?
Well, recently it was definitely that Nevada project. To be sitting, we had our own lunchroom, and we had these meals that were being carted in from Vegas 3 times a day of like the most incredible food. We had tables full of like gourmet food that we could go to any time of the day, vitamin programs, just
what about
crazy stuff. We had shamans come in to bless our walls. We'd go off to the Mirage and other places to go see like a Cirque du Soleil or some like amazing act in the evening, and it was just
like rock
nuts.
stars. Like you guys are the artist rock star equivalent doing whole.
Yeah, but not wankers. Some rock stars are just absolute wankers. We'll leave it at that. But they are in that sense. But I think there was a lot of when you see someone who's like super skilled but human, they just still have their humanity about them. I mean, the occasional rock star is fun. It's fun. It's fun for the night, but you wouldn't want to live with it. But yeah, that was an incredible project. Some of the early projects when I was in Europe, doing like really, really large scale walls, but with like groups of guys.
Yeah.
And there were some walls that I was painting in Bavaria that we'd actually camp out at the wall. They were in a place where we actually just could camp out. We'd camp out next to a river and then paint all day long. And it just left this overwhelming impression and this sort of tight-knit kind of family and bonds with people that I've had for 20 years now because of it.
It sort of takes me as an industry that spits out the dickhead.
Oh.
No?
Not really. They just kind of move on to the next party. Maybe they find a group of dickheads.
It's funny. I was lucky enough to have a chat with Matt Hall, Red Bull stunt plane.
Oh, yep.
And they have the Red Bull Air Race, and he was talking about, I go, do people come into the scene that, a young kid, because most of them are over 40, 45, like most of them are in their 50s, right? And Matt's, probably going to kill me, he's probably just around that 40, 50 or whatever. But he was talking that the young kids come in and they just, some of them just don't blend in and then they go. And he talks about how they come in and then they go because they realise, hey, it's not an area to be, let's say, reckless, albeit we watch them and think they're reckless.
Yes.
To them, they're not reckless. My life is, I don't want to kill myself, so I don't want to kill the crowd. So,
but then every now and then the Maverick comes in and pulls it off, and you're like, all right.
There you go. That's exactly right. That's no different than your scene, huh?
Yes. We gave him the bird goose.
We have permission for a flyby. I've been trying to do a tower. With talking of characters, what would be the biggest character or crazy person in your I don't know about crew, but your crew, your scene, the people that you're associated
We're in the field.
Yeah.
There's a lot of massive characters in my crew, TMD, especially Fat One. He's Burley Mowry, boy from Auckland. Yeah, just so fun-loving and larger than life, and someone who just leaves an impression on you from the first time you ever meet them.
Yeah.
There's been some like graffiti, like T-Kid. He was like had just, I guess, the personality and the persona and what kind of precedes these people of what you see them, like sort of lived up to that sort of expectation at the time. Who else has been like just mad characters? There are so many in this field, in that type of art. There's a lot of quirky behaviour, and just fun-loving people like Smug. Do you know Smug's work? So Smug's an Australian guy from New South Wales originally, but he's been living in Scotland for the last 15 odd years. But he ends up back over here in summer doing some of the larger scale works. But he's like another one of the super freak portrait painters.
Man, he's got some
and very fast,
work,
like incredible work. He's a close mate of mine. He's just another really like funny guy to be around and hang out with. Soffles is like a massive personality and like super funny.
Really?
Yeah, like amazing. Amazingly like quirky and fun. There's I think in the sort of graffiti scene, I've come across like a lot of the sort of most quirkiest sort of out there sort of people. And then the other sort of group of people that I've really enjoyed spending time with is the skateboard community.
Okay.
Yeah, just wild.
Have you seen all this mayhem?
Yeah.
That's full on, that doco.
Yeah, it is. It's incredible.
I remember it all too.
Yeah.
Like, have you watched it, Kevin? It's a killer doco. Like, it's hard to believe. When it comes together, you're like, fuck, this is fucking real.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, we haven't got time. It is definitely... It is an eye-opener. It was actually very well put together doco too.
Yeah.
To actually see that this was happening from Australia, taking on Tony Hawk. Oh, it's another story. But, okay.
The old 920, wasn't it? Was it 920?
Well, that's for
the 900.
900.
Unbelievable.
So if we look at all the things you've done, amazing artist, and it's thanks a lot for coming in. It's so cool to have you come in and have a chat about the thing you love. I love speaking to people that love what they're doing.
Yeah, and I could talk seriously all day for
Well, next time we'll have to... Well, you got to come back and do something here because I'm going to put a wall of Matchbox cars up there, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. See, thank you very much.
My boy still plays with that one that you gave him at the shop every day. He's so car obsessed. It's crazy. The first thing he says in the morning, apart from like booby, is car.
Well, he's got two things right, hasn't he?
Mm-hmm.
If you were sitting around the table, if you weren't doing what you're doing right now, and you could do absolutely anything on the planet, what would you be doing?
If I had the balls, I'd be a singer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like opera, hip hop.
I'd probably I'd be a little bit fluid between a couple of genres, but I like movement as well. So song and dance.
What?
Somewhere in a
kidding
somewhere in a parallel dimension, I'm singing and dancing like 24/7 for sure.
Okay, I love it. That's cool. I like how you actually.
That's my stuff. Actually, I think half the reason why I can paint the way I do, it's attributed to body mechanics and movement. I grew up with my mum being a dancer, and I didn't go to creche. I'd stand up next to my mum while she taught jazz ballet and practiced movement, obsessed with martial arts and this other stuff, and actually takes that sort of movement between dancing, martial arts, and popping and locking. Because popping and locking takes a lot of precise movements and be able to sort of click into them. And when you can move like on a certain plane and be repetitive. So when I paint, I can move along a certain plane and be, set up and prepared to do that. And that's why
even then it just looked like it was...
Technically, I can almost do exactly the same movement. I can paint a dead straight line because of that. And it comes from that movement,
That's awesome. I mean, one of my claims to fame was I went out with the BC1 crew.
Oh, yeah.
And it was a private Red Bull party, just in this, and they had it set up on the floor, and everyone's like, so you could take it in turns, and I was like, yeah, all right, I can do, and I can do the rock forward, rock back. That's about it. And they were like, yeah, they're sitting there,
The up rock.
yeah, they're all sitting there going, all right, and I go, all right, sit back down. They were looking at me, going, what are you doing? I said,
No, if they're in BC one, they're like
they're amazing,
crazy.
They were freaks.
Yeah.
Like what they were doing was amazing, and they all thought I worked for Red Bull, and I didn't. So I was shouting drinks all night to the whole crew, which they were getting free drinks anyway, but I was getting free drinks because they all thought I worked for Red Bull.
Classic.
But I was a guest at Red Bull. Anyway, Tintin, if you're listening, you'll know that story. So we get to this final thing. We got 2 questions left for you. They're hard-hitting. These are the hard-hitting questions that we have there. If there was one thing that you could do that would have an impact on the world, what would that be?
End starvation. Straight off.
That's easy.
No one on this planet needs to die of starvation. There's so much food and there's so much waste.
We waste. I think it's in Australia. It's about 400 tons a year goes into landfill.
Yeah,
it's a huge number.
Yeah.
So there has to be better work done. I agree 100% because we shouldn't be in a situation, and we're guilty of it. I've tried a lot better to make sure what I order I eat. That's probably why I put on weight. But it's trying to make sure that it's got to be some processes, and we do Ozfresh and what they're and Harvest, and they all do try to pick up to make sure we can get back into the community.
I mean, it's gotten a lot better than what it used to be. I mean, none of this stuff was around a decade ago.
No, and the best part about it, it's only going to get better. So I think that's awesome. No, I don't think anyone said that. So that's your claim to fame. There's one more thing.
It's a big thing. I think in the era as a child growing up and seeing the adverts specifically, of kids dying of famine in Africa, that never left me. Yeah. And the idea that if you're a parent, like knowing you're being a parent now and not being able to feed your child and seeing them perish before your eyes, simply not because they can't get like a handful of rice. Yeah. If we can't correct that as humanity, there's something deeply, deeply wrong. So and I think that needs correcting.
Yeah, love it. Okay, and I'm happy to say I think that's going to get better, but there's still a long way to go. And let's bring us to this last question. So,
drum roll.
If you died,
who says I'm gonna die?
If you died in the physical sense, and you came back, reincarnated as a board game, what board game would you like to come back as? And while you're gathering your thoughts on that, it's been a lot of options, and I don't want to railroad you into what other people have said, because I've learnt that once I give a few suggestions, that might be the one. But you could ask what mine would be.
What was yours then? Which board game have you reincarnated
myself as Scrabble, right?
Okay.
Because sometimes what I say is really good and get good points, and sometimes what I say isn't and don't get any good points. But you never know what's going to come out. Each game will be different. So for me, I thought a good assumption, a thing I'd like to come back as Scrabble, because it's always different, always changing.
All right.
Sometimes good, sometimes bad. Hey, that's me.
I don't have a good repertoire of board games, but just off the top of my head, it's going to come out like this. I love the number 4. I always played basketball under the number 4.
Yeah.
And Connect 4, there's always like a different winner. You're making new connections every time.
It's programming.
You're looking at different sets of programming. So maybe I'd sort of get spat back out as an eagle or something else like that.
Afterwards,
but fly and soar higher.
So Connect 4 it is. It's been a pleasure having you in. I love speaking to people that are, I think you're the pinnacle of what you're doing in the scene, and you're making an influence on other people. I really appreciate coming in and having a chat to us about it. I did have a few questions come through. I've gone through most of them. One of them was, can you do a piece on the Drake's Collingswood side wall? we at Collingswood there, we got a store and the wall is terrible. There's a side piece wall, which is a landscape. So, hey, maybe we should have a chat about that. But
I'm keen.
let's
do it. Lock it in.
Yeah, something come through about that. We definitely want to be involved in things that you're doing, and if there's somehow that we can have some affiliation moving forward, showcasing pieces of people coming through, having walls that we have available for things to do, and just being able to to help you on your journey, because you're here because we love what you do. So.
I've got big plans. A lot of exciting things in the pipelines on many different levels. I'm always pushing into sort of other creative fields and trying to find ways to pull South Australian artists together along with technology and other things. So,
well, we're very happy to be
I'll be chatting with you in about a month's time.
And we've got some guy that can edit quite well and film quite well and doesn't delete the footage.
Not every time.
Not every time.
Not every time.
And occasionally presses record. But yeah, we're loving what you're seeing. I think it's great, not only for Australia, it's fantastic for South Australia and Adelaide. And thanks very much.
Appreciate your time. Thanks, mate.
Sweet.
Rock and roll.